Hello, everyone. My name is Teresa Ansick. I'm the CEO of Accurate Business Services. And today I am hosting the Ovaledge LinkedIn Live. And I'm very excited because a good friend of mine, Dr. Sue Rayburn, is our guest. And she has been working with me for the past 2 years on her data governance journey for her organization. She's the Vice President of Information Management and Analytics and for Delta Credit Union here in Atlanta, Georgia. Thank you for joining me, Sue.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. This is an absolute pleasure to come and talk to you, Teresa, about a favorite topic of ours, right?
I know. I was going to say it's going to be like having a cup of coffee with a good friend. I'm very excited. How long have you been at Delta Credit, and can you tell us a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, sure. So I've been with Delta Community Credit Union since 2012. I was brought in to manage their business intelligence department. And prior to that, I had about 8 years at Equifax, where I was in multiple roles, all in the data analytics space. And before that, I was at Cox Automotive. We started their first data warehouse there. So I have about 23 years in the data and analytics space and in various capacities and roles.
That's fantastic. And can you tell me about how you first learned of data governance?
So, to me, when you think about analytics, when you think about any kind of extracting value out of your data assets, it's a resource that needs to be managed well. And governance to me is all about really asserting that control and direction, making sure that you have good processes, you've got the right people, you've got the right technologies in order to make good decisions with the data. You have the accountability structures in place, and because you're ultimately using it to drive your business. So, governance to me is all about really making sure that you're managing your most important asset, if arguably the most important asset that companies have in today's data-driven world. You're managing it effectively.
Absolutely. For me, data governance was a eureka moment after struggling in a company I was leading their data and analytics team. And when I heard about it, it was just like, this is it. This is going to be what ends our struggles. Because we knew that if we applied some of these processes, that we would be able to deliver quality product. And we wanted to deliver a good product, but felt like we were always just treading water. So it was a big shift.
Right.
And from an internal perspective, it's easy to get the team on board because they see that the benefits are there for them to be able to be proud of what they're producing. But it's more of a challenge to get business and other entities and leadership on board. And I see this as being
Right.
one of your real strengths.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share how your secret sauce for getting those people to start paying attention and enabling the governance process to take root?
Yeah. So, to me, it dawned on me when I joined Delta Community. I took a lot of time in terms of talking to leaders across the business to understand their challenges, what was working, what was not working. They had tried to do data warehousing before I landed there, and the experience was not good because it was a very technology-driven initiative. They were trying to have their voice heard. And when I say their voice, I'm talking to the business. So, the eureka moment for me, Teresa, was that it really needs to be a business-led process. It cannot be something that technology is mandating. But at the same time, in order to really make sure that the data works for everyone, you have to put in checks and balances. You've got to make sure that you have standards, you have consistency in the data. So, it's kind of a marriage of those two things. But the first thing I did was engage the business and, put a governance structure in place where I had a governance council of sorts. It was a two-tiered structure. The top level, it was the executives, And then the middle tier were the vice presidents, the people that really owned key business processes. And I gave them, handed the keys to the kingdom to them to say, okay, what is it you want to do in this data driven analytics process? So it started with that. And, so it led to decisions on, common key performance metrics. How would you define them? Who's a member? It's as basic as that. If you want to produce a metric like member churn, you've got to define a member. So the business was in the driver's seat. So they made these decisions. We facilitated that. I facilitated the process, me and my team. We facilitated the process, but the business was in charge. And when you have a good collaboration like that, you're really looking at it from a usage point of view, from the viewpoint, the perspective of the customer that you're serving, and it makes data governance, come alive, and it makes it something that produces value from day one, so it's sustainable. So
Perfect.
that was the
Yeah.
unique. You need to get business engaged and excited about it.
Yes. And I know just from my personal experience, watching you for the last 2 years has been inspiring, and how you approach those, because you did take a multi-thread approach in engaging the vice presidents, the senior leadership, the business, and all of the entities, and inviting them to the table. But you brought up at the end of your comments the value. So once you started creating that value, it started creating curiosity. Can you tell me what type of value you've been able to demonstrate so far in your process?
Yeah, so by virtue of getting the business on board and really directing the course of our business intelligence journey, what we've been able to accomplish is, you know, uh, eliminate data silos. So all of our data lives in this data analytics ecosystem that we call the data warehouse. From day one, we put in good standards and processes to manage the quality. So like I explained in the blog, it may seem very basic and silly, but you need to be able to tie back your numbers in your data warehouse to some kind of a golden standard. So for us, it was a trial balance. Make sure that your loans match up to what the books of accounts say. So it started with that. We put in all those type of guardrails and controls, so it inherently added trust to the quality of the data that we had in the data warehouse. So it encouraged adoption, it encouraged usage, and then as we matured, the integrated nature of the data, the fact that you could ask multiple questions. No, it was not just siloed in nature. So that really started getting people more and more excited. But now, when you're looking at cross-functional processes and information, the data that lives in your data warehouse, we needed better processes. We had this data dictionary that we managed in Excel. And if somebody needed to know what the definition for a particular item was, like let's take a term like delinquency. Now, this would be something that our lending team would be actively involved in defining. But somebody from the deposit side of the house, they may want to know what this is so that they can use it in their own reporting and their analysis. Having that one single source of the truth and one single definition is helpful in that regard. But as people started looking into information that they were not curating, we realized that we were not able to keep up with what we had in our dictionary. And that's when we needed automation, we needed the help of tools like Ovaledge to take our, practice to the next level.
That's fantastic. I do hear a lot that the business owners that are creating the information and curating the definition have a grown awareness now of all of the different ways in the organization that that information is being used and relied on, and it's given them a perspective that they did not previously have. So that's always exciting. And to be able to give somebody a person to ask a question to on the catalog, there's stewards, there's owners, there's technical support people that are already familiar with that, so that they're going directly to the sources, and the sources are transparent when they have a question. Are you are you getting any sense that you're able to capture your capacity back from non-value added activities where people are wondering, who to ask a question to or what is this made of? And now they have someplace to go. So it's actually making people more efficient in their duties.
I absolutely think so. Ovaledge has acted as, and I mentioned this in the blog as well. It has had that water cooler effect. We have dedicated people within my team that have done a fantastic job of really, bringing a community sense to this whole purpose of managing our data effectively and making sure that people are getting the biggest value out of it. They're extracting the value. And what Ovaledge has been able to do is provide the efficiencies in terms of not having to rely on, some kind of tribal knowledge or talking to, somebody they know within the team and then waiting to get a response, etc. Now they can go and self-help themselves. And what's more interesting is now we are able to crowdsource the
Mm,
glossary to people that really should be involved in defining some of these terms. And in the past, when we had a data dictionary, our business analysts within our team would define, take a term like member. We would say, okay, maybe member is not a good example. Take a different term where what is um, a segment, generational segment, say. We'll say,
mm,
okay, this generational segment is based on age, but somebody from the business could add a lot more color in terms of how they define something. And this is what is happening now. We are able to crowdsource this to people within the business. They are able to say, hey, I don't like this, the way you've described this. Let me give you my
hmm.
input. They add value that way. And now they're
Right,
taking ownership of something that they are part of, and they're able to
right.
contribute. And I think this is the only way to scale. There's one team that is heavily bottlenecked in terms of being able to provide all of the service and also interjecting on matters that we may not be experts in. I mean, we bring in the
Hmm.
data, we do all of the hard work in terms of harmonizing it, but we have to rely on the subject matter experts to, provide better
Right.
definitions, to add context and, you know, um, their perspective on what a data item is and what is the trust level of that. So this is something we have within Ovaledge also. How much is it being used? Where is it being sourced from? All of that is automatically provided, right? So they can look at the
Yes.
lineage of a metric within a report and trace it back to which system it is coming from and who is responsible for creating it. Now they have
Right.
a contact to go to if they have specific questions.
Yes, and it's been exciting to watch for you with you and your team as the evolution of the business description has taken place because we have that collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started with 75 characters in the business description, and then someone asked a question, and then shout out to Stacy and Eric. They've
Yeah,
continued to grow those definitions. Every time a question is asked,
absolutely.
we learn more about it. So now when I'm looking at the definitions, it says this is used in regulatory reporting. Well, now somebody that wants to
Right.
change the requirements for that segment knows don't mess with this. This is a
Exactly.
regulatory reporting field. And there's other ways to delineate that as well, but it's just been really great because you see as all of that locally obtained knowledge starts to get contributed to that item, in your
Correct.
business glossary, and then everyone knows that the first two digits of this contract means the region that the contract is to be deployed in. I was here for 8 years and I've never known that. And you start hearing people say
Well,
things like that, and
yeah.
it's definitely palatable in what I see happening in your organization.
Yeah, and I think that one thing that Stacy and Eric have been able to do is to drive that excitement around this. They have created these things. Initially, I was a little skeptical. They have these sessions that they would offer from time to time, where they set up these office hours and have people come to them with questions they had about the data. And I was like, really, would they participate? But I'm just amazed at the adoption from the business and their excitement about uh, you know participating in these sessions, learning more, and helping to drive the quality and the definitions and what's really adding context and color to all of the data that we have, which is fantastic. To me, this is what successful data governance looks like. It adds value. It
Absolutely.
is something that everybody can participate in, and it resonates with the the users.
Yes. And you've been able to do a really good job of holding off the two enemies of data governance, in my opinion, which is focus and chaos. Those are the things that you want to really keep out of your program. And you've done a great job of maintaining focus with your team, with your goals, and and reducing chaos by having the process and procedures and guiding your team really well. Can you tell us some of the things that you have utilized that have helped maintain those guardrails for your program?
Yeah, so the the we started with trying to bring efficiencies into our process. Like I said, we've had governance from day one. It's
Mm.
just a question of maturing and really adding on those efficiencies was really what got us on the path of purchasing a tool like Ovaledge to give us momentum and build on the controls we already had, because the controls we had were in place, but it was such a manual effort. So with this, we got those efficiencies. We've also been able to create that excitement among our users and help them adopt the tool and really think in terms, adopt that data centric mindset, if you will. The other thing that we are actively working on is trying to get, so one thing, like I said, when we started this program, the idea was to immediately establish trustworthiness of the data that we had, so people would actually come and use the data and make better data-driven decisions. Um, but our the way we established those controls had to be, again, we had to put boundaries around it, right? So we made
Mhm.
sure that data sources could tie back to some golden version of the truth, but we didn't necessarily go get to the attribute level. And as we get more into, one of our active endeavors at this point is to really get advanced analytics going, to really get to that next level in our evolution with analytics, predictive and prescriptive analytics. And for that, the quality of the data is at a totally new level, right? Now you're
Mhm.
starting to look at things, the features that feed into models, for instance. So one of the uh, regulatory things, I wouldn't necessarily call it a regulatory, it's a regulation, but it's a standard that we have to meet. It's called CISO, which every company that has loan assets will have to be able to use data at the customer level in order to create a provision for loan losses, which all banks do and all financial institutions. So one thing that feeds into that model is the credit score of the customer or the member in our case. And previously, we wouldn't have really gotten to the level of an attribute within a particular data source. We would let the data owners really manage that. But now, because this truly impacts what we're reporting in our financial statements, etc., there's an extra level of scrutiny. So we've been able to leverage Ovaledge to start profiling some of these feature level data elements that feed into models and proactively manage the quality of that. So to us, that's a level of capability that we did not have previously. Now we are able to bring in you know, a more uh, enhanced perspective, if you will. It's going to help us really manage our AI and machine learning models as we step into the future. We're already thinking about
Yeah.
that towards and leveraging Ovaledge to do that.
So as you advance your AI and analytics capabilities, being able to explain how you calculated something and memorialize that in the tool, do you see people going to the tool to find out and understand what that calculation is, and you're not explaining it every time the phone rings? And
Absolutely. So that the documentation, the cataloging is one aspect, but the quality is the other aspect that I referred to earlier. So now we are able to use the tagging capabilities within Ovaledge to tell us, where the data that goes into the CECL model is coming from. Now you can look
uh,
back and look at the sources. You can manage quality proactively. Credit score is a key data element that feeds into that model, and if something happens with the profile of that data element, it can really impact your model. So now we can
absolutely.
proactively manage that from both a understanding perspective, from a cataloging perspective, and a quality perspective. So it's a win-win for everyone.
All right. What is the next wave of data governance functionality that you're going to be taking on in the coming 2024 year?
Yeah. So um, our plans are to take. So data governance has been pretty. I would say, pretty bounded in terms of how we look at data governance today is really more about that data and analytics ecosystem, i.e., our data warehouse. So the next evolution for us is to take it to the enterprise level and start thinking about wherever data lives within our ecosystem. So we put a very formal data governance council in place. We're working towards making sure that we understand where our data lives in all our ecosystems, not just within the data warehouse, but within our IT systems perhaps, and then our partner ecosystem. So as a credit union that has limited resources available to us, we're always looking to our partners across the industry to help us with various functionality and features and systems, software, etc. So, for instance, we work with a company to use their software to originate consumer loans. So the data lives in their ecosystem, their databases. We have not necessarily, governed those assets. We obviously have things in our legal agreements and such, but now if we are going to be exposed to regulations like, say, for instance, GDPR in Europe. We have the CCPA in California also. We want to protect ourselves from a privacy standpoint. So that truly is our next foray for us to really start
Yeah.
thinking more enterprise scale and not just about how
Yeah.
data quality or data cataloging impacts analytics, but
Right.
data lives everywhere. It's the lifeblood of our financial institution. So
Yeah.
we
And
need
I,
to govern that at the highest level.
right. And I've been a part of those meeting with you and your team. And although that your security team is absolutely stellar, and they're doing
Mhm.
all of that, they do know where their PII is, but being able to bring it into the governance and provide transparency around
Correct.
that is a game changer, because now they're going to get visibility and understand more about how PII is on the reports and the different types of
Right.
access and
And
all
also,
of the.
Teresa, when you have, sorry, didn't mean to
That's
interrupt
all
you.
right.
But what I
No, go
wanted
right
to
ahead.
say is if you have but regulation like GDPR. And I don't think the day is far off, especially we are moving into more of this AI, accelerated world where everybody is
Oh, yeah.
going to start, everybody's talking about Gen AI, for instance. But data is the fuel that feeds that AI engine, right? So
Right.
you need to be, and we are also living in a world where every user, every customer, every member wants privacy. They want to protect what companies know about them. And if you the I think the first step to accomplishing that is to know where it lives. Where does
Mhm.
customer information live? Like, for instance, somebody says, I want to be forgotten. Well, how are you able to do that in a way that you can really act upon it if you don't know where all that
Right.
customer's information is located in your ecosystem,
Yep.
not just your data warehouse? So really, that is the focus of our enterprise program, which is really much more holistic, thinking about balancing the quality aspects of using the information to drive positive business income outcomes with protecting ourselves
Right.
from security challenges or privacy issues.
Fantastic. What piece of advice would you give someone who is starting their data governance initiatives in a banking organization? How would you coach me if I were just starting off?
So, I would really start from the basics. I ask myself the question because data governance is an ocean. You can really get lost if you don't have focus, if you don't really think about what your objectives are, right? So, if it is about really gaining control over data silos, for instance, and many financial institutions have this challenge because data is in disparate systems, and you depending on who you ask, the definition for something will be different, right? So even how you
Mhm.
calculate revenue could be different depending on which business unit you talk to, or which department you talk to. So it really depends on what that business objective is in making sure that you're really managing your data assets. So I would say, think of this as a journey first. It is not an IT project. It doesn't have a start date and end date. It truly is a program that needs to be cultivated for, uh, you know, for now and for the future, for time immemorial, if I'd say. It really, and the best thing that you could get is to get somebody at the executive level to sponsor this. You need advocacy at the top. You need
Absolutely.
somebody at the executive table really demonstrating that leadership and really helping set the agenda and champion this as something that's truly important to the company. The business has a key role in this. Like I said, the data is owned by the business, they are the subject matter experts, and they need to be involved from day one. I would start with a narrow focus. Really build your roadmap over time. Really think about what your biggest challenges are, and create business objectives which are very, very directed towards solving for those problems. Take an iterative approach. Start small, take a domain at a time, if you will. You have to demonstrate value from the beginning, otherwise it's not sustainable. People will start thinking
Yeah.
it's big bureaucratic exercise, and you will not get the participation and cooperation that's needed. Um, so those are some of the tips I have. We
Have you
started
been able
small. Only
you
now
started
yeah, we started small. We started thinking about the data warehouse, and because we were trying to use our data assets to make things more efficient for everyone,
yeah.
to comply with regulations, reduce risks, etc. So that's where we started. But it depends on the company and what their challenge truly is.
Yeah.
Start
What
with
their
that.
drivers. Yeah.
Mhm.
Do you have any roadblocks or barriers that you've been able to overcome that you can share?
So from a roadblock standpoint, I don't know, are you specifically asking about in terms of the, you know, getting adoption or
Getting
what's that?
adoption, yeah, sometimes I see organizations struggle with keeping their data owners engaged or uh, making sure that participation s- continues to increase.
Right. So for us, I've really not had that particular challenge, but I'll tell you one area where I've been challenged. Um,
Yeah.
because we didn't have that enterprise perspective, and we have been so successful in eliminating data silos and getting everybody to trust and use the data in the data warehouse. The challenge for us has been working with our external partners. Like I mentioned earlier, we work with a variety of software providers and partners that offer functionality that we can't build internally. It just makes sense for us to buy these tools. But then what happens is we have to work with these partners to take charge of our data assets, right?
Mhm.
So I'll give you an example. When several years ago we were switching vendors as far as our loan origination platform went, and we were talking to the vendors to make sure that we would get the data we needed in order to drive our reporting and our analysis, right?
Right.
um, and the vendors promised us, oh, you'll get what you need and all that. And our focus legitimately was to really make sure that we were serving our members. So we needed to be have the system up and running so that we could start accepting consumer loan applications, right? So that is the first priority. Data always, falls behind in terms of being a top priority. And in this case, what happened after we got the system up and live, we're saying, okay, what about the data so that we can start looking at how many applications did we receive, how many did we have to manually approve, how many did we decline, etc. We've started working with the vendor to start giving us that data, and they tell us we'll ship you a CD once a month. Like what? A CD once a month?
It's not going to
And
work.
it was about 5, 6 years ago. And, so that was truly a roadblock that we had to navigate.
Yeah.
And so that prompted me to work with our in house legal team to come up with some language around what are expectations around getting access to data and, making sure that we had support around it. Sometimes they throw some data at you and they'll ask you to figure it out. There's no data dictionary, nothing that describes the data. So,
Yes.
so we worked with our legal team to come up with some boilerplate language that we could include in all our contracts. So that was a roadblock that was interesting. But in working with various partners across the company, we were able to kind of solve for that. You may not think of this as traditional data governance, but if it's about
Oh,
uh, adding,
third-party data is a challenge in a lot of
yeah,
organizations. It's
yeah,
definitely an area that needs to be focused on for sure. And I think
yeah,
that being able to bring that third-party data in with the proper definitions, and
correct.
bringing it into the ecosystem is also very critical in being able to then consume it accurately. The other thing that I like to do with third-party data is bring the business to the table. So when I have a vendor with third party data and I'm struggling because they're not sending it on time, they change the format,
Mhm.
suddenly has all nulls in one field, it can really drag
Oh,
your
yeah,
capacity out of your organization. So now I'm bringing it in and I have it curated in the tool, and that business owner is aware of how much time we're struggling with this one vendor. So the business owner and the relationship manager start saying, "Hey, this is expensive data and it doesn't have to
right.
be. So we need you to raise your game." So we've been able to watch people close that conversation. I think we could do a whole session just on third party data.
Yeah, in
Um,
this case, it is really not even third-party data. It's our data, right? It's first-party data.
yeah,
It's consumer loan application. So it's
right.
it's first-party data in that sense. So it just happens to live in a data silo that we can't reach because it's hosted in their systems. So it's a SaaS
Yes.
application. It's hosted in their systems, and sometimes some of the SaaS providers don't realize they think we are a credit union. We probably, would have laxer standards, but no, I mean, we are very data driven in that we want to get our data, make sure it's integrated with everything else so that we can truly understand what value we are providing to our members, etc. Right? So,
Right, right. So, do you have time for questions? We've got some questions that are coming in from the audience. Is that accurate, Kayla?
sure.
Awesome. All right. Are they the ones highlighted in blue? Yes. Okay, great. I have Gelman over here. Sue, what are a few of the important activities you did to democratize data governance across various business functions? From Imran.
So
Thank you, Imran.
I think, yeah, thanks, Imran. So I think for us, I mentioned earlier, right? I mean, what is democracy? It is by the people, for the people, of the people, right? So I think that you cannot have the data democratization without involving your business. So when we set up that two-tier governance structure where we had the executives championing it at a high level, making sure that we had the funding and the resources to do what we needed to do to advance our analytic goals. We involve the business in terms of setting priorities, setting the agenda, setting definitions, the metadata, defining the standards as far as quality standards, etc. So I started with I was very fortunate in that I had executive sponsorship from day one. So we had executives that were truly interested in advancing our analytics, data and analytics agenda. So I had that sponsorship. But then by bringing these folks to the table, we brought in folks from marketing, we brought in people from operations. They led the agenda, so I was just a facilitator. Putting them in the driver's seat, I think, is the most important thing you can do, because when they know that you build that accountability framework where you say this is your data, guys, and you need to drive the agenda. I think it can be very powerful because it puts the control in their hands. I think that's
Absolutely.
the one thing that I'd say helped us be successful, honestly.
Fantastic. Do we have another question? Three more questions. How deep does your data stewardship program go? Data domain level or project level, team level, or both?
um So thanks, Raymond. So our stewardship really is at that data domain level, and actually, Ovaledge has really helped us with that because we've really gone about taking everything in our glossary, tying it back to the domain, and Ovaledge forces you to do that from the get-go.
Mhm.
And that helps you establish those data owners and data stewards. So I would say ours is definitely more at that domain level. But sometimes we have like initiatives, like we're doing the CECL. Like I said, it's an accounting standard that that we have to manage too. And we've been able to utilize the tools to do some level of project level tracking of the data, and assigning stewardship responsibilities at that level as well. So we
Mhm.
have a hybrid, but I'd say predominantly it's at the data domain level.
Absolutely. And the other thing I wanted to point out is there's a stewardship of a reporting object if you were the
Mhm.
owner and steward of the reporting asset, and then there's owner and stewards of the data dictionary objects, and then there's the owners and stewards of the business glossary area.
Correct.
And so they have different responsibilities depending on what it is that they're stewarding. And I think
Right.
one of the things that I've really liked what Stacy's been coordinating at your agency is bringing those stewards together for a monthly meeting
Hmm.
where they're
Hmm.
sharing and onboarding new stewards, and they're creating like a natural leaders in within the group that have
Yeah.
really taken to enhancing those responsibilities.
Yeah, and the business wouldn't do this if they didn't perceive the value. So,
Mhm.
they come to these meetings willingly, they partake of the information, they share information. So it is such an active process, and it's a very, very interactive, I will say. So we've seen a lot of value.
Absolutely. What do we have next? We have two more. Hi, Sue. The question is for you. Can you please share some insight on implementing data accountability model in enterprise level from a LinkedIn user?
So
An
this is the next.
anonymous.
Thank you, LinkedIn user. So I think the next step for us is to take this to the enterprise level, like I mentioned, right? We are still in the very initial part of our journey with that. Like I said, we've been very successful with really governing our data warehouse and our analytics environment. But uh, I think in terms of the building that data accountability model at the enterprise level, it's just taking what we have done at ecosystem level and then building it out to the enterprise level. We already have the foundation, I feel. So my advice to anybody that's just starting their journey, start small. Start in a way that it produces value from day one. What you're challenged with, and make sure that you're building value as you go. So as we go towards this enterprise model, this is about bigger challenges that we have. Like I said, when it comes to GDPR or CCPA, how are we going to address some of these? We have policies in place. We have classification policies in place. How do you know you're applying it consistently across all your data ecosystems? So that's where our next, area of focus is. And as we take our journey to the next level, I will keep you all posted. Maybe today
We'll do this again.
we can talk about what we're doing with enterprise data governance. But right now, it's really in its initial phase. We've just been able to agree to a charter and get people get started on our program. But yeah, that's what I would like to say.
Awesome. All right. And the next one is from Tehran. What are the emerging trends and future challenges in data governance for the banking industry?
In terms of emerging trends, I just mentioned the privacy challenge. I think this is going to become more and more pervasive as we move into companies starting to use things like Gen AI, etc. Right? So really knowing where all your data lives, where all your sensitive data lives, where customer data lives is going to be a huge undertaking, especially if companies have grown through acquisitions and all that. Making sure that you have a holistic approach to that is huge. It's going to be challenging. You really need to know. I mean, now it's going to live in various even especially for bigger companies that are global in nature. It's going to be a huge challenge in terms of corralling all of this and managing it. In terms of another emerging trend, another thing is, we've seen some of these bank failures happen recently, right? Understanding exposure, risk exposure at a deeper
Mm,
level is going to need, being able to slice and dice your data to understand where those risks are lurking. For us, for instance, some of those recent incidents have prompted us to look at any kind of additional exposure we have uh, in terms of certain special groups that we serve. Like Delta Airlines is a big part of our customer base. So
mm,
understanding the exposure we have with respect to certain groups that are a big part of our portfolio is going to be important for us. To really
yeah.
manage a risk more effectively. So I think this is an ongoing thing. I don't know if it's an emerging trend, but really understanding how the risk drivers within your and using the data to understand that is going to be something that you could, you know, uh, probably address with your data governance program.
Yeah. I see to the regulatory reporting,
Right.
getting that really well immersed in your data governance program and being able to provide that transparency so that if you've got an application team and they're making modifications or they want to do an upgrade,
Right.
identifying those items at their inception that are being used in regulatory reporting are going, and creating transparency around that is going to be, I think, a trend for the future as well. I think that
Right.
especially in the banks, there's a lot of regulatory reporting and understanding and being able to reuse some of those um, values in your internal reporting as well. But just being, being able to identify that and keep it consistent, I think is,
And just going back to that notion of customer data, we have
yeah,
the CFPB in the US taking a lot of active interest in protecting, the financial risk for consumers. And,
mhm, yeah,
data governance will, if you manage your customer data effectively, it really helps you with uh, really being in compliance with some of the things the CFPB, promulgates, I think.
right.
So that's
That's
another
right. Thanks.
challenge I
Thank you,
think we
Charan,
face.
for your question. Sue, it has been an absolute pleasure, as always. And I want to thank you
Likewise.
for coming on today and sharing your experience and expertise. I do want to remind everybody that's online, if there is a particular topic that you would like us to cover in a future LinkedIn Live, please put it out there. If you agree with something somebody else said, echo that. Also, if you comment hashtag data in the group chat, we will invite you to a free Q&A session about data governance, where we are going to be here with a team of data governance experts and professionals, and you can ask us anything, and we will have kind of like an office hours.
Thank
All
you, Teresa.
right.
I
You're welcome.
really appreciate you having me on your uh, this live stream. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Sue. You've been my first guest, so I'm sure we'll make it a regular habit.
Thank you
All
again.
right. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.